The moon is hovering like a sleepy coin above the horizon, half tucked behind a thin veil of cloud. Somewhere far beyond the city walls, roosters are doing their usual overachieving, crowing at shadows that haven't moved in hours. But here in the heart of the imperial palace, it's still the deep, weightless dark of pre-dawn. You're lying on a narrow silk mat, one hand tucked under your cheek, the other curled around nothing in particular. And no, you're not the emperor, don't get excited. You're just a palace attendant, the kind who folds other people's robes and then bows when they thank you for doing it silently. But tonight, or rather this very early morning, you've been summoned. A shadow passes your door. Soft footfalls, the rustle of layered robes, a low knock. Then the quiet voice you were expecting. The emperor dreams again. You rise, stretch. Try to remember if you left your sense of urgency on the pillow. Probably not by the time you step. Out into the corridor, the palace is hushed, but not asleep. Paper lanterns sway gently from carved wooden brackets, glowing with that familiar golden warmth that always feels a little like being inside a poem. You pass a servant rubbing cedar oil into the hinges of a screen door because apparently squeaks are banned near imperial dreams. You probably won't make it through this day. But don't worry, no one else will either. If you enjoy drifting through the forgotten hours of dynasties long dead, feel free to gently tap the like button, maybe even subscribe. It won't wake the emperor, probably not, and if you're still with US, let us know your local time and where you're listening from. Are you in a tiny apartment in Seoul, a farmhouse in Alberta, a blanket fort in your own imagination? All are welcome. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You arrive outside the emperor's private dreaming chamber, not his bedroom. That would be too simple. This is a space reserved strictly for sleeping with intention. Walls painted with scenes of cranes in flight. A lacquered wood floor that smells faintly of camphor and candle wax. The emperor is already awake, sitting upright, eyes still glassy from dreams. His robe is embroidered with 9 golden dragons, not 8, not 10, 9, because symbolism in. This place has layers deeper than any dumpling. He says nothing at first, just points to the incense burner. You light it. The air fills with the scent of chrysanthemum, dried citrus peel, and a whisper of something more bitter, possibly ginseng, possibly stress. And finally, he speaks. There was a turtle the size of a hill. It wore a palace on its back. You nod solemnly. Dream turtles are notoriously private creatures. Then comes the task. Record this vision. As always, the emperor believes these dreams guide his battles, and not metaphorically. If he dreams of bamboo snapping, he calls off an invasion. If he dreams of rain on a red robe, someone gets exiled. And here's your major historical fact. Several emperors of the Tang and Song dynasties kept full-time dream scribes whose entire job was to write down whatever strange vision their ruler half mumbled at dawn. These dreams sometimes influenced massive political decisions. It's bureaucracy, but with clouds and turtles. You unroll a scroll. The brush is still damp from last time. The Emperor leans in. The turtle told me to wait until the red winds rise. You don't ask what red winds are. That would be inappropriate. You. Just right. Obscure tidbit for you. In some courts, there were designated sleep interpreters who weren't trained in dreams, psychology, or strategy, but in storytelling. Their job was to phrase imperial dreams in the most flattering possible way. A kind of royal dream PR department. Historians still debate whether these dreams actually influenced decisions, or were just poetic excuses for choices already made. Other way, you suspect a few wars were launched because someone ate bad mushrooms too late at night. Outside, dawn is beginning to pull at the edges of the sky like someone folding back a silk sheet. The Emperor lies back down. You roll the scroll. Tight, seal it with wax, and bow yourself out. You won't sleep again tonight. But the dream will follow you. A turtle with a palace. On its back. It's going to be one of those days. You find yourself walking along the east garden wall. The scroll still warm in your sleeve, though the ink has dried and the Emperor has likely drifted back into another dream entirely. Hopefully one with fewer reptiles. The air smells of morning rain that hasn't happened yet. Sweet anticipation. The kind that makes crickets stop mid-chirp to check the clouds. You pause under a cherry tree that isn't blooming because it's the wrong season and poetry rarely cooperates with the calendar. Still, the branches curl above you like fingers. Holding a secret dot in the distance, the war drums begin. Soft, slow. A rehearsal. Soldiers training in formation outside the palace gates. And you wonder, what will the Emperor dream after the battle? See, people talk a lot about the dreams that lead to war. The omens, the visions, the prophetic turtles. But no one asks what. It's like to sleep after sending 5,000 men into a mountain pass where only birds return. Here's your historical fact. Emperor Wu of Han was said to have nightmares for months after his first campaign in Central Asia. In one dream, he stood in a field of headless statues, stone soldiers, arms raised, mouths open in silent accusation. That image made it into official records. You can almost hear the court scribe whispering, are we sure this is the one we want to archive? Obscure tidbit for you. One emperor reportedly insisted on sleeping on tiger pelts after a military defeat, not for comfort, but to absorb the strength of the beast. The court politely ignored the smell. You press your hand against the dead. Cool garden wall. The texture is chipped and mossy. You think of the emperor's bed pillowed, perfumed, polished, and wonder if he ever misses walls that feel real. Scholars still disagree on how much. Dream ritual shaped strategy and how much was theatrics to impress courtiers and intimidate rivals. After all, I dreamed of fire and glory. Sounds a lot better than my general bribed a messenger. The drums quicken. You begin walking again. Remember the corridor you passed on your way to the dreaming room? You duck back into it now. Shadows still stretch long along the stone. A low hum greets you other attendants, gathered in the corridor's crook, whispering dream interpretations and predictions like gamblers murmuring odds. Did he say turtle or tortoise? Talus on its back or neck? Red winds? Does that mean the northern cavalry? You keep walking. You don't join in. The dream is already a story now, passed from mouth to mouth like warmed wine. At the far end of the hallway, a cat naps in a patch of sun. You envy its priorities. You pause again. Close your eyes. You imagine a turtle, a hill, a red wind, and somewhere beyond the mountains, the next battle already sharpening its teeth. You return to your small quarters behind the silk-draped kitchens where everything smells like sesame oil and secrets. You set the scroll gently on your sleeping mat. It won't be opened again unless someone needs to clarify the message, which usually just means rewriting the metaphor so it offends fewer generals. A bowl of congee waits on the stool beside the wall. Lukewarm as usual, you eat it slowly. The rice gluey and bland, but somehow comforting, like the voice of someone who's disappointed in you but still brings you tea. Outside your window, the plum trees are heavy with fruit, though no one's quite ready to pick them. They sit there, ripening in slow defiance, as if to say, not everything has to serve your schedule. You lie down and stare at the ceiling beams. There's a crack in the wood shaped exactly like a rabbit if you squint. Or a sleeping general. Hard to say. You think about Emperor Wen of Han. Not the most famous emperor, but a thoughtful one. He once dreamed of a bridge made of bones stretching over a river of ink. The dream was so vivid. He ordered all battle reports to be written in black-on-black scrolls for the next month, completely unreadable, but very artistic. That actually happened. The obscure tidbit. Some dreams weren't even about war or omens. One emperor supposedly dreamed of a talking fish that advised him to trust the eunuch with the left hand. No one ever figured out who that was, so the entire left wing of the palace staff got promoted. Just in case, historians are still unsure whether that dream was metaphorical wisdom or just indigestion, wrapped in symbolism. You drift somewhere between sleep and thought. And then you're back in the garden. Or at least, you dream that you are. The plum trees are gone, replaced by cranes, dozens of them standing still, watching you like judges at a silent trial. One of them opens its beak and out comes the emperor's voice. Where is the wind? You open your mouth to answer, but the plum tree speaks instead. Waiting, it says. You wake with your face against the mat and a slight ache in your left shoulder. You slept through the rest of morning court. Not great, but you'll catch up. The emperor naps through half of it anyway. You splash your face with cold water from the basin. It smells faintly of mint leaves someone must have dropped in earlier. Or perhaps you're still dreaming. Either way, it's time to report to the astrologer. Because when the emperor dreams, The stars must be consulted, even if they say nothing at all. The astrologer's chamber is located high above the southern tower, where the wind presses through paper screens and the birds have no respect for confidentiality. You climb the narrow staircase, feet aching, shoulders stiff. Each step creaks like it remembers someone else's regret. When you enter, the astrologer is already scribbling. He never looks up, just gestures toward the tea on the corner table. Bitter stuff, but it's supposed to help with clarity or ulcers. Possibly both. He finally speaks. Turtle dreams again? You nod. He sighs and draws a small square in the corner of the scroll. Third turtle this season. The chamber is filled with astronomical tools, armillary spheres, lacquered star maps, and wooden rods marked with constellations. One of them leans slightly, like it's had a long day for the past decade. He points at a silk chart hanging on the far wall. It shows the sky from last night. Mars in the east. Water rabbit in ascent. You know what that means? You nod again. You do not. He mutters. It means the Emperor's anxiety is manifesting again, probably from the campaign in the West. You offer him the scroll. He reads it silently, then exhales through his nose. Red winds, always the red winds. You. Wait, this part is important. He lights a thin stick of juniper incense. The scent fills the room like old memories and sharper decisions. Here's your historical fact. In the Tang dynasty, astrologers were not just interpreters of stars, they were politically significant. A poorly phrased prediction could result in exile or worse, more meetings. Your obscure tidbit? Some emperors had their horoscopes cross-referenced with those of enemy generals. If the stars aligned too closely, the campaign was delayed. No one wanted to fight someone with mirror fate. The astrologer finally nods. Tell the general to wait 2 days. The dream, combined with Mars, suggests hesitation. You write that down, slowly, as if the ink will carry the weight of starlight. Historians still debate whether astrology had genuine sway or if it simply provided a convenient excuse for delays and indecision. Then again, so do most corporate memos. You descend the tower slowly, the wind tugging at your sleeves. You can see the training grounds below, soldiers sparring in slow rhythm, flags snapping in the breeze that isn't red yet, but close. You walk along the outer wall, back toward the garden. A plum drops beside you. You pick it up. Bite into it, sour, but not unpleasant. Somewhere, a turtle is dreaming again, and the emperor waits. Midday in the imperial court is not loud, exactly, but it hums. Like a beehive made entirely of silk slippers, whispered politics, and the sound of sleeves brushing against lacquered wood. You walk through it with practiced stillness, the kind that says, I'm important enough to be invisible. Every official is pretending to read something, but their eyes flick sideways every few seconds. Just in case today is the day someone dramatically accuses someone else of treason. It happens more often than you'd expect, usually right before lunch. You slip past the archivists and down the corridor of muraled panels, each one painted with some glorified battle scene where the emperor in question is twice the size of his. Generals and always spotless despite riding through mud. But you're not here for history today. You're here to deliver the astrologer's reading to General Yin. He stands at the edge of a koi pond, hands folded behind his back, watching the fish like they've insulted him, and he's waiting for an apology. You clear your throat. He doesn't. Turn. The red wind is not yet blowing, you say. Still no reaction. You add, the emperor dreamed of a turtle again. Now he speaks. Did the turtle win the battle? You hesitate. It advised waiting. A pause, then a quiet sigh. Turtles always advise waiting. Here's your historical fact. General Yin is modeled loosely on a real figure, General Li Guan, a commander during the Han Dynasty. Known for his valor, yes, but also for his frustrating tendency to act before permission. He once ignored 3 omens in a row and ended up surrounded. No one brings that up at banquets. General Yin finally turns toward you. His armor is ceremonial. All gilded dragons and tiny brass plates that would absolutely not stop an arrow. But it's pretty. Tell the emperor, he says, that I will wait for the wind. But if the turtle dreams again tomorrow, I expect it to at least show me a map. You nod. Try not to smirk. Fail slightly. Obscure tidbit. One Han Dynasty general used to consult his personal dream oracle, a goose. The goose was not gifted, but extremely loud and apparently honked whenever he approached the wrong direction. It saved his life twice. Historians remain unclear on whether it was luck, divine poultry intervention, or just solid goose-based navigation. You leave the general beside the koi pond, still frowning at the fish like they're withholding intelligence, back through the courtyard where a troupe of entertainers is rehearsing a fan dance for tonight's feast. The fans are too bright, the music a little sharp. You keep walking. You pass the bronze bell tower just as the hour is struck. 7 tones. Not midnight. Not yet. But still, you wonder what the emperor is dreaming now. Evening cloaks the palace in lavender shadows, and the lanterns have all been lit. Their glow pools across walkways and softens the hard edges of the stone courtyards. Somewhere, a lute plays quietly. Probably someone trying to impress someone. You're back in your quarters, folding robes that aren't yours. Again, the emperor's attendants rotate shifts, but tonight you've been requested specifically. Not for laundry, for listening. Because tonight the emperor will dream before the feast. You walk the familiar halls, each step muffled by layers of woven matting. The walls whisper with painted chrysanthemums and trailing vines. You pass a group of palace guards playing a dice game in near silence, their coins stacked like tiny towers of regret. Inside the dreaming room, the emperor is already reclining. A servant is brushing his hair with a comb made of jade. The scent. In the room is different, now heavier. Sandalwood, burned orange peel, a thread of something smoky beneath it all. You kneel. Wait. Finally, the emperor says, "The turtle came again." You nod. Pretend you're surprised, but this time, he adds, it was crying. You blink. Not what you expected. He continues, eyes half-lidded, already drifting. It carried the palace not on its back, but on its shell, upside down, and the red wind was fire. Here's your historical fact. Dreams involving fire were taken, especially seriously in many dynasties. Entire campaigns were postponed due to visions of burning robes or smoke-filled temples. Fire was seen as transformation or punishment. You write carefully. Each character deliberate. Obscure tidbit. There was a brief trend during the early Song dynasty where emperors wore dream sashes, long strips of silk said to capture the essence of a dream. You'd hang them above the bed. Most of them just absorbed dust and candle soot, but they looked nice. The emperor's voice fades into slow breathing. You rise without sound, scroll in hand, and back out of the chamber. Historians still wonder whether emperors truly believed their dreams were prophetic, or if it was a convenient way to justify decisions without naming names. The stars told. Me is a lot harder to argue with than my cousin bribed me. Outside, the feast is beginning. Music drifts over the walls, soft as mist. You don't go. You're too tired for silk-wrapped laughter. Instead, you walk to the edge of the southern wall, where no one is watching. The sky is full of stars. You unfold the scroll. Read the words you just wrote. A crying turtle. An upside-down palace. A red wind made of fire. And in the distance, the sound of drums. You sleep like a stone under a wet cloth. Heavy, shapeless. Brief. When you wake, the light in your window is pale and watery. The kind of sunlight that feels uncertain of its own arrival. You sit up slowly, feeling the stiffness in your knees. The weight of the emperor's crying turtle dream still, hanging like a fog over your chest. There's a folded note beside your sleeping mat. Wax seal, plain ribbon. Not the emperor's crest. This one bears the mark of the inner garden office, which means only one thing. Someone wants to know what the emperor dreamed before anyone else does. Palace gossip is an ancient sport. Some play chess, some play politics. Others play guess the dream and wager heavily. You don't open the note. You already know what it asks, and you already know your answer. You burn it, quietly, under the tea brazier. Here's the thing. The emperor's dreams are less about what's seen and more about what's feared. You've begun to notice a pattern. When he's confident, the dreams are filled with birds, clear water, sunlight in hallways. When he's anxious, turtles, wind, fire. Stairs that go nowhere. Dreams are emotional maps with no legends. You step outside and breathe in the garden air. Earthy, sweet, mulberries ripening. Camphor trees swaying like they're shaking there. Heads at you, A palace page approaches, fast, breathless. The emperor will see you, now. Back again, dreaming chamber. Still dim, still scented with the past. The emperor is pacing, in silk slippers that make no sound. His robe today is darker midnight blue, embroidered with cranes and silver thread. I've changed my mind, he says. We march at first frost. You blink. But the dream. It was fire, he says flatly. And what is fire? If not the signal to begin? Here's your historical fact. Emperor Tazong of Tang reportedly reversed a military strategy based solely on a series of recurring dreams involving a crimson banner burning in the wind. He later claimed the dream was a divine instruction. You write down the new order, but your hand trembles slightly. Obscure tidbit. One emperor once ordered a full orchestra to perform beneath his window every night in hopes of guiding his dreams toward more pleasant territory. It worked until the flutist fell asleep mid-song. Historians debate whether these decisions were dreams first or decision first. Did the emperor dream of fire because he planned a war? Or did he plan the war because the dream needed somewhere to go? You fold the scroll. Deliver it to the military. Scribes dot by nightfall. Every saddle in the armory is being polished. Every sword oiled. You lie awake, listening. Waiting for the red wind. The cold arrives earlier than expected. Not harsh, not cruel, just present. Like an uninvited guest who's already made themselves tea, the palace adjusts. Robes grow thicker. Incense changes from floral to resinous myrrh, frankincense, pine. Fires are lit earlier, and even the koi seem to swim slower. You're summoned again. Not to the emperor. This time to the dream archivist. Yes, that's a real position. A man whose sole purpose is to organize, annotate, and store the emperor's dreams. He's been at it for 20 years and has developed a permanent ink stain on the side of his nose. His chamber is silent except for the scratching of brush on parchment. The walls are covered in scroll racks, each labeled with season, moon phase, and sometimes bizarre summaries like falling leaves, 2 wolves, possible marriage anxiety. You hand over the most recent dream scroll. He nods without looking. The turtle again? You pause. No, fire. That makes him stop writing, just for a second. Then, with a sigh, 3rd dream of fire this year. We're overdue for a campaign. Here's your historical fact. During the reign of Emperor Wu of Han, dreams were not only archived, but categorized by elements: earth, fire, water, metal, wood. Advisors would consult this catalog before proposing military or civil policy. It was essentially a mood board for ruling an empire. He writes the latest entry in tiny, flawless calligraphy. Upside down palace, crying turtle, fire as wind. Obscure tidbit. In the late Eastern Han period, some officials wore rings with carved symbols based on recent imperial dreams. They believed it brought favor, or at least helped them remember what to pretend to believe. Historians argue whether this archival process had genuine influence or was just imperial theater, meant to convince everyone the emperor's inner world was as organized as his outer one. Spoiler, it wasn't. You leave the chamber quietly. Outside, frost is forming on the stone paths. The plum trees are bare now, but the branches still holding themselves like they remember the fruit. Back in your quarters, you sit cross-legged and unroll a blank scroll. Not for the emperor. For yourself, you begin to write. A wind came through the court today, not of politics, nor season, but of something unnamed. It smelled of old paper and anticipation. The kind that turns dreams into orders. You pause. The ink pools slightly at the edge of the brush. Then you add, and I dreamed nothing last night, but somehow I still woke up tired. The morning before deployment is quieter than expected. No trumpets, no parades. Just the faint shuffling of armor being adjusted, horses being fed dried lotus root to calm their tempers, and officials trying not to step in things they'd rather not explain to their wives. You've been summoned. Again. This time, not to the emperor, but to the tent where war plans are drawn in dry ink, only to be revised later with real blood. The general stands at a long cedar table, surrounded by maps that look suspiciously like guesses. He looks up. Did the emperor dream again? You shake your head. Not last night. He exhales, almost disappointed. Good, then the decision is ours. Here's your historical fact. Before major campaigns, Chinese generals were often given permission to interpret the emperor's dreams themselves, sometimes rewriting them entirely to fit battlefield needs. One account even suggests that a military scribe once turned a dream about a falling peach into a green light for naval invasion. The general rolls up a map, slides it into a tube. Do you know why the turtle mattered? He asks. You wait. He doesn't really want an answer. It was slow, but it carried the palace. It didn't collapse, and it didn't panic. He tightens the leather strap on his scroll case. We all dream of fire, but only turtles carry anything after the fire goes out. You walk beside him toward the gates. Along the way, you pass the court musicians. They're tuning flutes that haven't been played since last spring. Not because music is needed, but because the emperor insists. The army marched to something that sounds heroic with minor melancholy. Obscure tidbit. One Tang-era marching song was composed entirely from the emperor's dream fragments phrases like silver foxes under rain and the mountain that looks back. No one knew what it meant, but it had a good rhythm. Historians still argue whether generals use dreams as genuine signs or just nice-sounding cover stories. He ordered it, holds more weight than I panicked and guessed. At the outer wall, you watch the soldiers mount their horses. Their faces calm in that specific resigned way that says, well, we packed. Let's go. The wind picks up dry and cold. It isn't red, but it's close. You stay behind. Someone has to. Dreams don't archive themselves, and anyway, The emperor sleeps lighter when there's war outside. He doesn't say much these days. Just eats less, wakes more. Often stares longer at things that used to be background. The fish, the mountains, the curls of steam from his tea. You sit with him sometimes in the garden, just past sundown. He speaks in half-thoughts. The fire in the dream wasn't burning, he said last night. It was waiting. You didn't know what to say. So you handed him another plum. He didn't eat it, just held it, as if it might turn into something else. Today, the palace is thick with rumors. Some say the general already won. Others say he's turned back. Someone heard his horse fell ill. Someone else swears the turtle was a spy all along. You ignore them. In the dream archivist's chamber, you help file scrolls. Dust floats like soft ghosts in the sunlight. The archivist reads over your shoulder. No turtle last night? No dream at all, you say. He nods. Sometimes silence is the loudest omen. Here's your historical fact. Some emperors were more superstitious about a lack of dreams than about the dreams themselves. A dreamless night before a battle was considered a bad sign. It meant the heavens were withholding insight, or that you were no longer worth the gods' attention. The emperor naps more during the day now. Shallow, fretful naps. The kind where your eyes stay half open and the body's never quite sure it's resting. You see it. You write it, but you don't say it out loud. Obscure tidbit. During one late Qing period campaign, the emperor insisted that his entire court nap at the same hour each day, believing shared sleep would align their dreams. It didn't help the war, but it made the palace very quiet for exactly 1 hour. Historians still disagree whether these quiet hours were political performance or sincere attempts at unity through sleep. That night, you dream for the first time in weeks, but not of turtles. You're in the emperor's chamber, except the ceiling is gone. The stars are closer than they should be. A single crane flies in circles overhead, not graceful. Just tired. You wake up with a strange feeling behind your ribs, not dread, not hope. Just the sense that something has shifted. And outside your window, a red leaf tumbles past. The messenger arrives at dawn, looking like the horse rode him more than the other way around. Dust on his face, ice in his hair. You meet him at the inner gate, where the guards don't smile unless told to. He doesn't bow, just shoves a scroll into your hands and mutters, "Read it to him, quickly." You don't ask questions. You don't need to. A scroll this early means either disaster or glory, and neither one lets you finish your tea. The emperor is already awake, wrapped in a thick fur cloak, despite the indoor warmth. He's standing near the brazier, staring into it like it owes him something. You kneel, unroll the scroll, and read. The general has taken the mountain pass. Few casualties. The enemy retreated before dawn. The red wind, if one believes in such things, blew. Behind them, the emperor closes his eyes, exhales. You wait. Here's your historical fact. In the Han Dynasty, victories were not announced with trumpets, but with colored silk banners sent ahead of the returning army, red for triumph, white for heavy loss, yellow for please explain further. He finally speaks. Did the turtle cry in that one? You blink. No turtle, my lord. A small smile, almost invisible. Perhaps it finally found peace. He walks to the window. Snow is beginning to fall in hesitant little flakes as if checking whether they're welcome. Obscure tidbit in one legend. An emperor tried to bribe the gods of dreams by leaving bowls of honey beside his bed. It worked, briefly, until ants found them. The resulting panic was recorded as a chaotic omen of crawling fate. Historians still debate whether the honey trick was superstition or just a midnight. Craving gone, bureaucratic you leave the emperor in the quiet of first snow. Outside, the palace stirs with a rare energy. Victories are uncommon. Dreams fulfilled. Even more so, and somewhere in the archive, a scroll is being labeled Red Wind, Mountain Taken, No Turtle. The feast is inevitable. Victory demands celebration, and celebration demands too much food and too little sincerity. The main hall is draped in gold and crimson. Musicians tune their strings with a kind of solemn mischief, as if they know all the dignitaries here will pretend to enjoy the same 5 songs they've heard since adolescence. You're seated at a side table, close enough to hear the emperor's laughter, far enough that you're not expected to cause any. The dishes arrive in waves: duck glazed in plum, pickled ginger wrapped in seaweed, a soup so clear it reflects your indecision. The emperor is in good spirits. He's speaking to one of the foreign envoys about cranes, or possibly metaphors involving cranes. It's hard to tell when he's being poetic and when he's just evading a topic. You sip rice wine slowly. The room is warm, but not sleepy. The difference is subtle but sharp. Here's your historical fact. After a victorious campaign, the Tang court often staged elaborate dream-themed performances. Actors played the emperor's subconscious, dressed as spirits, clouds, and occasionally rice bowls. Reviews were mixed. The lights dimmed slightly as dancers entered the hall. They wear robes dyed in fire hues: orange, rust, red. Their fans mimic wind. The choreography clearly inspired by someone's dream interpretation committee. Obscure tidbit: one court playwright once wrote an entire opera based on a dream the emperor hadn't had. He simply guessed what might be appropriate and staged it preemptively. It was a hit. Until the emperor had the actual dream and realized it ended differently. The playwright was reassigned to weather reports. Historians still argue whether these dream performances influenced politics or if politics simply needed prettier excuses to feel meaningful. You excuse yourself before dessert. The plum cake smells incredible, but your stomach's already full of metaphors. Outside, the snow has thickened. The koi pond is still. The wind doesn't howl. It hums. Back in your quarters, you light a single candle. And for the first time in weeks, you write a scroll for yourself. It reads, "Tonight, no turtle, no fire, just quiet." And maybe that, too, is worth archiving. The victory fades faster than expected. Not the memory, just the attention span. By the 5th day, fewer bow. When the general's name is spoken, the red wind is no longer referenced in court poetry. Even the musicians start tuning their flutes to brighter keys, as if pretending nothing ever burned. You notice it in the emperor most. He naps more, but sleeps less. He stares longer at scrolls without reading them. The crane on his sleeve once, an emblem of soaring fate, now looks like it's just circling. You're called back to the dreaming chamber. The tone of the message is soft but urgent. He's seated again by the incense tray, the air thick with something bitter. Wormwood, maybe, or disillusion. "You ever dream something," he says, "and wish you hadn't remembered it?" You nod. It's safer than saying "every morning." He lifts a scroll, but doesn't hand it to you yet. This one was different. No turtle, no fire. "You wait, a child," he says, dressed in my old battle robe, sitting at the edge of the garden, asking me where I buried the wind. He finally gives you the scroll. You don't unroll it until you're alone. The ink is shakier. The character is slightly crooked. One stroke too many here. A missed hook there. It reads like memory, pretending to be metaphor. Here's your historical fact. Late in their reigns, many Chinese emperors recorded dreams less frequently. Not because they stopped dreaming, but because the interpretation stopped changing. Everything began to look the same. Shadows, echoes, figures in mist, obscure. Tidbit: one emperor had a special mirror crafted with jade backing and a silver front. He believed it allowed him to see dreams as reflections. The mirror cracked 2 weeks after a failed campaign. He claimed the dream escaped through the fracture. Historians debate whether this dream of the child symbolized regret, legacy, or simply the burden of having once believed in fire and turtles. That night, you tried to sleep, but the child from the scroll follows you into your own dream. It doesn't speak, just points at the koi pond where something red drifts under the ice. You start seeing the emperor less, not because you're dismissed, but because he seems to dissolve more easily into the background. Now, he takes longer walks alone. He reads scrolls but doesn't finish them. He sits beneath the plum trees, even in the snow, eyes closed. And yet, he dreams, or maybe he always did. You receive them less often, but they arrive nonetheless. Shorter, stranger. Once, simply, the stars fell upward. Another time, the fire returned. This time it whispered. You write them down, file them. Wonder if you're archiving prophecy or poetry. The dream archivist retires. No ceremony. He simply leaves a final note. The dreams are changing tone. Let someone younger misinterpret them now. You take his place, not because you wanted to, but because no one else wanted to. Here's your historical fact. In the Song dynasty, imperial dream records began being kept in poetic form, rhymed couplets, symbolic metaphors. Court scribes became part analyst, part poet, part furniture. You sit at the same desk now. The same beams overhead, same dust. A dream comes one morning, a new one. Different ink, different hand dot it reads. A crane with no wings walked through the fire and did not burn. It bowed to the emperor and asked, "Have you rested enough?" You're not sure if it's a question, a warning, or just an overworked metaphor. Obscure. Tidbit. One late Ming emperor hired a court dream interpreter who spoke entirely in riddles. It lasted 6 weeks before the emperor threw a plum at him and told him to stop being mysterious for 5 minutes. Historians still question whether the decline in clear dream reports toward the end of reigns was due to mental fatigue or the simple realization that dreams can't carry kingdoms forever. You watch the snow fall from your new desk. You wonder what dreams will be. Sent tomorrow got you wonder what dreams won't. And in that pause, between one interpretation and the next, you realize you no longer need to know. The emperor doesn't summon you anymore, not because he's angry, not because he's forgotten, but because the dreams have changed, become quieter, smaller, more personal. You hear it from the attendants. Little things. He talks in his sleep again. But not about turtles. Not about fire. Not about marching banners or sky omens. He says things like, "Let the water boil slower. Tell her not to wait in the cold." And once, it wasn't a turtle. It was me. You spend your days differently now, less running, less decoding. Metaphors about wind and stars. Instead, you read old dreams. Not because you're ordered to, but because they feel like letters from someone who used to know what they wanted. There's one from years ago crumpled, but not discarded. The plum tree bends toward the east. The sky turns its back. I walk the hallway without my name. You don't even remember transcribing it. But the handwriting is yours. Here's your final historical fact. The last dream ever recorded by a Tang emperor, shortly before his death, was a simple line written in his own hand. The mirror no longer reflects. It was placed in his tomb, alongside jade slippers and a wooden turtle carved with no face. You close the scroll. Let it rest beside the others. Obscure tidbit. One court scribe spent his final years writing imaginary dreams, ones he wished the emperor had. He bound them in green silk and titled the volume Dreams That Would Have Brought Peace. Historians still wonder whether those final years of unrecorded dreams were a loss or a mercy. Tonight, you walk the garden path alone. The snow is gone. The plum blossoms are just beginning to return. Tiny white petals like fragile thoughts, almost brave enough to bloom. You pass the koi pond. A single ripple disturbs the surface. You pause. Wait, but nothing breaks through. Maybe the wind has settled. Maybe the fire went out on its own. You sit beside the oldest tree. Close your eyes. And for once, you don't try to remember the dream you had last night. You let it go. Just like he did. Now the palace sleeps. Not the bustling, wary sleep of soldiers who know the cold could bring orders. Not the delicate, watchful sleep of ministers who fear decisions made without them, but the slow, weightless kind of sleep that comes when the dreams have said enough. The plum trees sigh in the warm night air. Somewhere, a distant lute plays notes too slow to be remembered, but too lovely to forget. Your scrolls are filed. Your brush is clean. The candle is nearly gone. And for the first time in years, you feel no pressure to write what the dream meant. Or even that mattered. Because maybe it didn't need to. Maybe some dreams are just shadows in silk, drifting through the hallways of people who once needed signs to feel safe. And now they are content with silence. You lean back, eyes half closed, listening to the room settle. You can still smell the faintest trace of sandalwood old memory wrapped in warmth. Outside, the koi turn lazily beneath moonlight. The stars, for once, don't whisper. And if you dream tonight, it will be your own. Soft, small, and finally untethered.